Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No Darkness But Ours.
A film that is quite hauntological, that does have elements of it's a strongly evocative of
Mm.
the 70s, but is also rooted very firmly in our present. Is one we've already discussed, Ben Wheatley's In the Earth.
Yes,
And so,
absolutely.
the opening sequence is very evocative of a 1970s movie, but I mean, then you get to the whole paraphernalia of the COVID pandemic, which is
hmm
you know which kind of very much links us to the present day. But again, this whole idea of the wood as a living entity and so forth. This is going into classic, kind of hauntological territory. But the whole point of it is both terrifying, but it's also awe-inspiring, and it is something that,
Yes.
if we can accept and process it, can redefine our whole understanding of what's around us.
Yes.
And in a way that might actually make things better in the future.
Yes. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I was thinking in a strange way of, and this brings us back to The Ugly Little Boy, but I was thinking in a strange way about, there's a kid's book, which was also kind of popular over here, called Stig of the Dump.
oh yes, I
yeah.
remember that as a kid. They used to get it read to us in class, and there was a children's ITV adaptation that I think stuck quite close to the book, and we were very.
I can believe that, and just the whole thing of like, I go down to the dump as just a little boy from a housing estate or whatever, go down to the dump, and I find a Neanderthal, a Cro-Magnon living in the dump, just because, as one does, eating ants.
There's been some kind of time slip, or there's some kind of in place, or whatever.
Hunting dogs with his spear.
Oh, I haven't read that book in years, but I have
making a house for himself out of junk.
Yes. Yeah, and it's just exactly, and the how and why of it is, well, who cares?
Yeah, or cat weasel, or Wurzel Gummidge, or it's like or the ghost of Thomas Kemp.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. There's so much overlap. I've spoken about this before when we talked about folk horror, but there's so much overlap in, because Britain is so small, but so many things have happened every fucking place that,
and so many different cultures, and kind of like thrown on top of one another, or violently into one another, or trampled over one another, or one another, or whatever.
It's like, and the idea that you could just, we were just we were raising another big building downtown, and we found a plague pit. What can you do? As you do, it's like this. The sewer goes down through the Red Lair, which has been there since, Boudica burned Londinium. And in a strange way, in Canada, there was that, and I've spoken about this before, this feeling that things were not as interesting as a place like Britain, but actually a simultaneous feeling that things were much older and weirder and more alien, because what was here before, Toronto itself, going back to when it was still muddy York, is only about 200 years old, I think, maybe 300 at the absolute most. I'm pretty sure 200. And there's this simultaneous, that stupid colonist impulse to go like, there was nothing here before, It's like
And various sort of indigenous people are like, excuse me.
yeah, exactly. There was everything here before. There was everything here before. You just didn't know about it. And therefore, that makes it the most amazing mystery of all.
Although I think there were parts of North America, certainly where there had been possibly spread by early European sort of intrusion, had actually been basically fairly massive. Not pandemic would be the right word, because pandemic is global, but massive epidemics, massive outbreaks of contagious disease against which the indigenous populations had no defense. And so there were parts of North America which had been virtually depopulated when
definitely
Europeans actually got there, because it was like everyone, you managed to well done, you managed to fucking kill everyone before you even walked in
well
here.
Done.
Touching the woo, way to go, white boys.
Or places like Cahokia, where you had like a flourishing and intense civilization for a certain amount of time, and big, big cities and huge mounds and earthworks, but everything was made out of wood and mud. Wood and mud and some stone, but not lots, because
so very little would be left.
And yet, there's that, the idea of scars on the land, the idea of, but what was here first?
I was reading a book.
If I plow this, what will be turned up from the earth?
I was reading a fascinating book called The Lost Villages of Britain, about all the little communities that have vanished. And of course, and the guy who wrote it was saying, in a lot of cases, a lot of this is the struggle, is the story of the haves and the have-nots, like the number of villages that were erased because, the Lord of the Manor wanted to build a deer park.
That's right.
And of course, in the north of England, you have the harrying of the north, which followed the conquest, which was because those folks in the Danelaw were not accepting the Norman yoke very well. Every time William went up to York to sort them out, as soon as he'd left, they started up again. So he said, okay, right, and sent a bunch of his guys to basically do scorched earth raids that destroyed everything. And you had outbreaks of cannibalism, as people tell them, something like 100,000 excess deaths, which at that time the population of England was maybe 2 million. So even William the Conqueror's own biographer was like, I can't think of anything good to say about this. This was a terrible idea. You have all these things, and of course you have places that have been lost to climate, to environmental or climate factors like coastal erosion and dunnage, and all along the east coast of Britain. You have floods, you have flooding, you have all sorts of these little knife edges that shift and make a particular place. You had the Little Ice Age, which made a lot of places that had higher altitudes, which had been perfectly habitable before, became unsustainable as farmsteads, and so got abandoned. You have all of these kind of things happening, but there was an awful lot on how to, looking for, how to sort of spot, how to spot spot signs of what might be a DMV, deserted medieval village sites, and a lot of it was, very often things like earthworks and stuff are because nature doesn't really do straight lines, so you will very often see, if you're seeing like a straight edge, if you see this, you see that. This is almost all of these almost telltale signs that some kind of settlement existed in a spot. So even when everything's been erased to the sort of the trained eye, or to the eye that knows what to look for, the evidence remains. The traces are still there.
The old straight path.
Yes,
absolutely. And so you have all of this kind of folded into the hauntological envelope. We've talked about it before, because it's all stuff that's worth talking about, and so you can have a movie or a book that seems hauntological because it's literally set in that era, but you can also have one which seems hauntological because it evokes the feeling of that era. And like Sarah Moss's books, evoke the feeling of that era. A book like Amanda Mason's The Wayward Girls takes essentially the story of the Fox sisters and kind of runs it through an Enfield poltergeist filter.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's really good, so you have, you know, you have the original investigation of this supposed haunting, and whatever was going on around that, back in like the very early 80s, I think. And then, you have one of the sisters in the modern day, meeting up with parapsychologists who now want to go back to the house where this supposed haunting went on, and bring her mother back to the place where this supposed haunting went on. And at which point, of course, you start getting a little more apparition phase kind of, did we create something? Were we actually evoking something? Was there something there? If there's something here, is it, an actual ghost, or is it something that we created? La la la. It's really good.
So I mean, what's often the most powerful thing is the evocation of the possibility.
Yes.
Of not sort of saying, yes, there is this kind of whole, and laying out some sort of some kind of like intricate cosmology. It is the possible. It's opening that door enough to suggest that these things could be true. These things are possible, and all that. If you've ever suffered through reading Bernard Shaw's Back to Methuselah, there's a bit at the end where Lilith has the final speech, and she says what mankind will become after this. What lies beyond this point, even the eyesight of Lilith cannot see. It is enough that there is a beyond.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's true. And that does have a lot to do with it. There are two short stories that come to my mind immediately. One of them is Whitewash by Rose Macaulay, which takes place in I guess, oh God. So it's on the Isle of Capri, and there's a tidal cave. And this woman, who I think it's probably like the Macaulay usually was writing around the 50s. So it's probably like the 1950s. And she's out with one of her aunts, and they're swimming in like Roman baths near the sea, and built by Tiberius. And she's like, oh, so I hear that Tiberius wasn't as bad as people say he was. And her aunt is like, oh no, but must we always have our monsters taken away from us by these whitewashers? And she's like, well, I think I'm going to go and explore the tidal caves. And her aunt's like, no, not me, because I hear terrible things went on in there. So she goes into a tidal cave and starts to hear what she thinks is the sea. She's up on a ledge, this weird sort of slimy weed covered ledge, and she hears what she thinks is the sea, but it sounds more and more like a crowd of people muttering and whispering and in terrible fear for their lives, like a whole bunch of people up on this ledge with her. And she moves towards what she thinks is a way out of the cave, going upwards towards, again, a Roman villa, probably Tiberian. And then she feels blocked, like she can't move forward, like something is pushing her back towards the ledge. And then she looks down into the water and she sees the shadow of a shark, like a huge white shark. And this voice behind her starts speaking in Latin, this gloating, ugly voice going, "Veni, seti, veni." Come, shark, come. And it's obvious that, this is like a sort of stone tape moment of, I guess, slaves getting pushed into the cave into the waters of the cave so that
amusement stuff.
Yeah, for the amusement of Tiberius. And about halfway through this, she realizes that whatever's going on, it can't actually do anything to her because she's alive and these people are dead and the shark is probably dead.
Yeah.
You know, but it's still horrible and she doesn't want to be there.
Yes.
Yes, like, you know, she has to like force herself back towards the front of the cave so that she can climb out, so that she can get out of it. You know, and this to me is like it's like a super hauntological story in the same way that yeah. Is it RTL Rolt or LTR Rolt?
Rolt, I think.
Yes. He wrote a book, not a book. He did write a book, but yeah, he wrote a story called the Shouting, which is where a guy is out with a friend of his, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we have to get from here to there. Why don't we go through those woods?" And the guy's and the friend is like, "No, I really don't want to." And he can really tell that his friend is actually kind of terrified of woods. And at a certain point he says, I'm really sorry I made you do that. And he's like, yeah, you know, it isn't that wood. It's like any woods. And he starts telling the story about how he was once out on his own and a whole bunch of, it was like twilight, and a whole bunch of children came out of the corn towards him. They seemed to be, they could have been Romani, or they could have been, you know, or they could have been Greek or Italian, but, you know, brown kids with slanted eyes, dark eyes, you know. And he was like, where are you guys going? And the kids are like, oh, we're going up to the hill in the wood for the shouting. And he's like, well, that's weird. Okay, whatever, you know. And he ends up like following the kids into the woods. And as far as I can tell, he has an experience which is almost like a moment of meeting with Pan.
Right.
You know, the shouting that happens and he can hear it. You know, there's this, you know, the kids are yelling. They don't actually sound horrified, but they sound almost horrified. And they definitely sound ecstatic. They sound wild. And there's this other voice that he becomes more and more like, I don't like that other voice at all. You know, it's like, I don't know what that voice is. It's low and it's weird and it's really pleased with itself in a very offensive way. And then at a certain point, he's like, I have to go. I have to get the hell out of this wood. And he, you know, and he turns and he starts like running through the woods, and the you know, he's getting torn at by twigs, and, you know, the leaves are, you know, like leaving green marks on him, and the voice just keeps like getting closer and closer and laughing behind him. And he starts screaming the first thing that comes into his head, which is that old rhyme about, my mother said I never should play with the gypsies in the wood. My mother said I never should play with the gypsies in the wood. And he like breaks out into the cornfield again. And he's like, never in life am I going to go back into
any woodland ever again, kind of thing.
Yeah. And what I love about that is that, again, it is like a fold in time. It is like a stone tape moment. It is very hauntological. It is very 1970s.
Yeah.
But what
you mentioned the stone tape, and there's another classic sort of hauntological kind of thing of this.
Absolutely. And, you know, and so successful that people now think that there's a thing called stone tape theory. Whereas actually he totally made it up. You know? You know, I mean, certainly there were stories where people were like, maybe this is sort of like a VHS tape running, or a loop, or a, you know, blah, blah, blah. But nobody had actually compiled it until the same tape. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think it's quite possibly a very be interested. I mean, while I don't think he was the only influence on the whole hauntological thing, it's probably I think it's probably fair to say that there's probably a lot. He either anticipated it or his work fed into it. As well as the stone tape. I mean, you have Quatermass in the Pit. You've got, I think, that one that you mentioned, the Road. There's a whole bunch of his which is looking for a kind of scientific or quasi-scientific sort of underpinning to ancient sort of ancient superstitions or religious motifs.
A kind of weirdness that goes back through Alan Garner, you know. And this idea that not just the noirish idea that there is always an earlier crime, but that a ritual always post-dates an actual event. It not only, you know, something happened and we want it to happen again, and therefore we do this thing.
Or we don't want it to happen.
Or we don't want it to happen again, and therefore we do this thing. And, you know...
well, fucking increase the fucking thing.
Yeah, I don't want you to fucking increase the fucking thing. Well, do that thing. That thing I like. It's true. There's an amazing movie that I saw recently, an Indonesian film that I found on Tubi called Death Knot. Where a guy, there's a brother and a sister. They're living in Jakarta, and their mother still lives in this little village out in the middle of quote nowhere, and she lives, you know, pretty well. She's in the biggest house in the village. Their family was, you know, fairly well off, but everyone in town thinks that she's a shaman. Or a witch, you know. At one point, somebody's. So, you know, when they hear that she's died, they have to come back to the village to, you know, go to her funeral, and they stop on the road to ask somebody for directions because it's not on GPS. It's not, you know, and there's no signal and la. And the person's like, "Oh, are you so and so's boy? She should have been burned, not buried." So it turns out that their mother has killed herself. Their mother went into the woods and hung herself from a tree. The husband of the sister comes with them. He's this really nice guy, but he doesn't know anything about their background at all. And you know, at a certain point, he says, "So your mother was a shaman? What? She made a pact with the devil? What is this, the whole thing?" You know, it's like, why do people say these things? And, you know, and the guy who's the main character is like, "Oh, you know, I mean, my mom believed all sorts of weird stuff, you know. I think she probably just had mental problems, but it's certainly true that when we were kids, you know, she was just like always off dancing in the wood." It's like never really taking care of us, and then our dad left, and, you know, la, you know, and it's just this really strange, this strange thing where, you know, she's where it's sort of like they've removed themselves from the situation. They've gone to Jakarta, and now they're civilized people, and they're like, "Yeah, oh, that's stupid stuff. I don't care," you know. But the further you get, but the longer you stay in the village, the more it's like creeping up on you.
Yeah.
Exactly what
yourself up emotionally as you had, and when you in, you can't repress it in the set. You can't repress it, and
exactly. What exactly was this thing that my mother was doing? Why was she doing it? Why
did she fucking increase the fucking thing?
Why did she fucking increase the fucking thing? And it goes in some really interesting places. So I'll tell you. Basically, she was worshiping this forest god. And the forest god was there always. There is a statue in the, like a Neolithic statue in the woods, almost like this little egg-shaped thing with a weird smile. And, you know, and at one point, our main character is talking to a local guy who's a scholar who has been studying this whole phenomenon, and may have been in love with his mother, you know, because she wasn't an unattractive woman, but you know, it was certainly one of her only friends, and he says, "Oh, so I suppose I suppose the people in the village, you know, put this thing up," and he's like, no, it was here before the village. I think the people in the village built the village around the forest because the Neolithic monument was there. You know, it's like, it's old. And what does it want? Well, it just wants you to worship it. That's it, you know. But if you don't worship it, then your friends will get possessed and they'll all have the weird smile and they'll all, you know, and pretty soon they'll start hating themselves.
I've just seen a film with a couple of films with similar, what's it called again? Death Knot. Death
Knot, yeah. It's an Indonesian film.
And yeah, it feels very familiar, but I'm not sure if I've just seen another film from that, you know, from that part of
yeah.
General
because, you know, certainly in much the same way that petroglyphs, Japanese petroglyphs, work into the work of shiraishi rather, you know, stuff like akotu and noroi. You know, there are old gods everywhere you go, right?
Yeah.
There are old, you know, gods where
you find people, you'll find gods that they've created.
Yeah, yeah. But I sort of love the idea that it's like, what does it want? It just wants you to go and dance in the woods. Wants you to go and, you know, it's like somebody's got to be doing it.
It wants to see you shake your titties.
It does.
What is this god? It's basically a pervert. It just basically wants to see people shaking their titties and their asses
or rather, it wants you to do what it wants you to do.
Yeah, just to have
It wants to have that power over you. It wants you to give it that power. You know, there's always that question of like, you know, what happens to old gods? What happens to, you know, if something that has had worship, something that has had sacrifice, what happens to that thing when people stop doing that, when they forget it? They want to forget it. They're like, oh yeah, you're too good for me now, right? You got a new god. Fuck you.
Yeah, and when somebody else rediscovers it or tries to start worshiping it again, is it a case of, oh, thank God, at last, you know, so is it grateful for the attention, or is it pissed off? Oh, right, you fucking forgot about me, didn't you? You thought you didn't need me anymore, and now you come to me for favors. Oh, you just wait, you bitches! I am gonna make you suffer.
Yeah. Remember Stigma, right? You know, that ghost story for Christmas, Stigma, which again, you know, comes from that hauntological era, you know, where it's like, and if you dig up this rock, you'll just start to bleed, and eventually you'll just bleed to death. Why? Because you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Why? Fuck you, that's why. You know? It's the general idea that, you know, not just that when Christians arrive, they turn your gods into demons, but that the gods turn themselves into demons. The gods turn themselves into monsters.
Yeah, because the Christian God isn't necessarily the only jealous one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, well, if you didn't want me to act like this and make your friends smile and, you know, and hang themselves, then you shouldn't have worshipped me in the first place, because I really got into that, man.
I was enjoying that relationship. Yes.
Absolutely. So, you know, again, again, it's like the mystery, you know, what's almost that Junji Ito impulse of what's inside this hole. This hole was made for me.
So we will be back next time and to lower the tone of the conversation again and more interesting stuff to talk shit about. But until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
I've been Gemma Files, and this, of course, has been No Darkness,
Darkness.
but ours.
Ha ha ha.